Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We'll just wait a couple of minutes just for people to come in, and then we'll start the webinar. Okay, as people are joining us, I'll just start the introduction. So a huge welcome to Catherine Barrett, who is joining us here this afternoon for the 4th COREx seminar series. Just to give you a little background on COREx, it's the Centre of Ocean Research and Exploration here in Galway, and it's a research centre, and it's really the coming together of a number of academics who are involved with marine research. My name is Sheila Fennell, and I work here in Earth and Ocean. So if you would like to follow us, the best way to follow us is on Twitter, on our Twitter handle at COREx Galway. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. If you want to ask some questions, you can use the Q&A. There's a few joining us as well over on YouTube. So please feel free to ask questions, and I'll put them to Catherine at the end of the webinar. So we'll move on to Catherine. So she's a graduate here from NUIG, and she graduated in 1998 with a master's in oceanography. She went then to work with BIM, and she's worked in a number of fisheries projects and services. And one of those projects is the amazing Fishing for Litter program. And I suppose it's a marine litter retrieval program that really the commercial sector of the fishing get involved with. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Catherine, and a huge welcome to Catherine and also to everyone joining us.
Thank you very much, Sheena.
Okay, I'll stop sharing there now, and away you go.
I'll just share, yeah, sorry. So that's, just double check that is
perfect, Catherine.
Yeah, perfect.
Can see it there. Great.
So thank you very much for inviting me virtually back to Galway. I loved Galway, and I suppose I just the working with people in the what we called the Martin Ryan at the time, now the Ryan Institute, and I'm actually still in contact, both personally and professionally with a number of them. So I'm delighted to be back, Sheena. Thank you for the invite. So I suppose what I'm wanting to share today, or what I've been asked to share, is so Ireland, under the European Fisheries Fund, have funded a Fishing for Litter, and we've broadened it under this kind of an umbrella called Clean Oceans. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about that today. So a little bit about me. So I'm originally from Roche's Point in Cork, and I did my undergraduate degree in earth science along with Eugene Farrell, also of university. And so I suppose these are my little boys here, and under the shelter there at Roche's Point, and my kids now would be 4th generation, literally playing and enjoying, and in Roche's Point. There's not very much there. It's just houses, a lighthouse, and some ruins. But in terms of, I suppose, how the connection to the sea and that marine environment is very special to us as a family, and me personally. My eldest boy, Cara, is named after a fisherman, and the smallest fella is called Macdara. And as you know, on the west coast of Ireland, there's an island, Macdara. He thinks it's his private property. But that name Macdara is the saint of fishermen and seafarers. So we're very connected as a family to the marine environment and its outcomes for both us and the sector, and obviously the society at large. So this picture of me back in 1998, and just after being conferred with my master's in oceanography. And I literally had submitted my master's, and I had gone for an interview in BIM, and I'd actually taken a day off work to come and be conferred. So I was very, very lucky that I that I literally had secured a job just coming out of oceanography into BIM. And the work is very varied. But, so I've done like various different things. I've done a lot of sea time. So I would have done sea time when I was in the Martin Rhine. Collecting our samples and collecting some of my colleagues collect their samples for science. And I carried on then, and I actually went on about maybe 30 odd, nearly 40 boats, kind of with fishermen. And I think that's where I really got to understand a little bit more that, this community both on and off the water. So a little bit on the fishing for litter. So we have a network of 12 ports. So we've been building these since 2015, and now we have a good network, we call it. So any boat that travels from, and you might have a boat that's in Clara Head fishing for prawns, then they might travel down the south coast and then over to Rossavale, over to the Porcupine. So we have a fleet that moves, according to their quota and according to the fishery. I suppose just a couple of the stats. Since 2015, the industry has retrieved 560 tonnes of marine litter across these 12 ports. We have 244 vessels registered, which brings us to over 1,000 men that are supporting the initiative of, if you see litter, could you bring it ashore? So just on the same basis nearly as tidy towns, if you see it, pick it up. We've also done other work in terms of characterising that waste and characterising their own waste to see how can we help them improve their own waste management and what services that they think that something like the EMFF fund through the likes of us and BIM could help them manage kind of collectively. So I kind of spoke about this Clean Oceans. We have a number of pillars. So retrieve is one pillar, so that this action of retrieving marine litter from the environment, this fishing for litter. But we also have other initiatives kind of that are interlinked. But what's critical, I think, for me in the catching sector was that fishing for litter opened this catalyst and created a dialogue around waste that we mightn't have had before, that it was mainly about the fish and fishing and, kind of markets and, and that kind of narrative. Whereas the fishing for litter opened up that wider conversation around the marine environment and what they see. Because as operators and practitioners and professional fishermen, they see an awful lot every day. And unless you ask them, it's very hard to know what they know. So, and then, we've things like we're establishing baselines to help us understand, what is it? What is the data? What is the data? And what is the data telling us? And I'll go through a little bit of that today. We've also engaged in kind of understanding net management a little bit better and how it goes from putting on the market and coming off the market, and where is the opportunity to improve a practice or to see where the blind spots are that are out of the control of the sector, but actually with support they could be improved. And also the recording. So at the moment, the marine litter we record through the harbour masters. Harbour masters are critical to the network. And they are the ones who will receive it, who will dispose of it appropriately, and we help to fund them to do that. And then we reach out, so reaching obviously directly to the vessels and the harbours, and then the wider community, for that it is, both fishermen and coastal communities have an issue with marine litter. And it's, but they might either see it differently or have different solutions. So, so we do a lot of work kind of on and off the pitch with Clean Coast and with the industry. And then how to reward them, so they don't look for financial reward for this. So we kind of, well, what other ways can you motivate and reward the sector to participate? And then, I suppose what's coming on now is, which it was launched there at the back end of 2020, the EU Green Deal, and how we can actually fit into this. So while the Fishing for Litter programme is just one initiative, and really, and at times you could actually say it's really a small part, but it's the catalyst for kind of driving change and understanding where we can go next, so that we can do it in a way that we're not either kind of overwhelmed or that the industry are kind of going, oh, sure, I can't do that, that's massive, or where do I start? So it's about, I suppose, as they'd say, eating the elephant in bite-sized chunks, So I suppose some of the themes in the Green Deal that are kind of quite relevant to what we're doing, you know, both in the medium and the short term, is this mobilizing industry for a clean and circular economy. So that's a big thing in terms of any of the resources of this natural capital that we have. You know, and how can we, and manufactured capital, how can we kind of capture it to have a circular economy? And also the effects that, you know, the positive effects that things like marine retrieval does on ecosystems and biodiversity. I seem to be stuck. Oh, there we go. Oh, I flew. Hang on out. Sorry, was it just a bit stuck? So in terms of the analysis of marine litter, so we do kind of a sampling program. And, you know, so on the outset, you know, you say, oh, wow, 60% of the marine litter is fishing gear. And I suppose there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, you know, that is where they're fishing. Sorry, that is where they're retrieving the marine litter on their fishing grounds. And, you know, so the opportunity to engage with fishing gear is high in that environment compared to, you know, in a field or, you know, or in hedges. And but what we working with the industry, they said we need to know more about that. They said it's not as straightforward as just everything is gear, because for them they see their gear differently. And you know, there is about 35 legal registered gears in the commission on different boats. So it's very you know, it's that's to them, for the industry to understand this more. They say we need to understand more what's in that. So so part of 2020 was actually looking with a professional net maker and professional fishermen to help us analyze the waste characterization better of this fraction nets. You know, and you know, we work with our we work with Clean Technology Centre in Cork and CIT to help us do this waste characterization. I call him my rubbish husband instead of my work husband. And so we go through the marine litter to see what are the insights we can harvest, you know. And you know, and we actually think if there is proper network and proper support for all of material, we might only have, you know, it might only be like 25% of what we actually retrieve might be true fishing for litter if there is facilities in place and communication in place for others, both for, you know, our fleet but also international fleets. The waters around Ireland, they're EU waters, and there is about 10 member states that are fishing off our states. And then when you go outside the 200-mile limit, you know, off Galway, you see in the summer that we have Russian fisher activity and also Japanese longliners. So there's an awful lot of activity there in the Northeast Atlantic. It is very productive. So there were the, you know, so we kind of, you know, bringing it down to how can we break the nets down into different components, you know, so what is truly, you know, what is retired, discarded, you know, into the trawl, into the ropes, into the long line. Again, breaking it into fractions for us to understand. The fishing flitters help to raise the profile of marine litter, and we hear anecdotally from the harbour masters that there's, you know, over the course of the program, that there is a higher compliance with waste management as well. So there's a knock-on effect, and again, this nudge factor and this you know, the amplification of good activity and good practice. You know, and I was saying the results, you know, the vessels, they're key to this type of marine litter retrieval, because they're constantly on those grounds. But it's not without the risk and work on their part to do so, as it is quite a hefty job to do, you know. Through fishing for litter, a lot of this material, it cannot be recycled. It is contaminated, it's tangled. The opportunity is creating early intervention for end of life gear to capture it, rather than end of pipe, which fishing for litter it is, you know. And that's why, you know, there is need for a national requirement. So this is material and photos that the lads would have sent me. And so this is like what we call a head rope of gill netting, but it's tied up in a ball, it's tied up, nicely tied, but there's no netting. So this was actually what we would categorize as deliberately dumped at sea. And they would be kind of these blue twine, which would be particular to a particular sector, particular fleet. And again, so we're building this picture of, you know, where the sources are coming from. This is longline material. Again, we don't have actually longline fisheries in Ireland. So again, this is a communal EU problem, an EU source. And, you know, but again, very important to bring it in. The opportunity actually is that this type of material is probably one of the easiest to find a pathway for recycling. But again, not in this condition. You know, it's about creating an opportunity for them to bring it in the first place, rather than it coming through the marine litter. So here we are, we got some ghost gear, and the difference with this is that at the front photo, it's a gill net that is highly contaminated. You can see a lot of growth on it, but it's got no ropes and no floats. So they have been removed, and then this material has effectively been dumped. The piece behind, it has ropes, it has floats. So the challenge is, well, was this deliberately, or sorry, was this lost by mistake? They might have got bad weather, or was it all dumped together, or was it that this was just the action of either a boat coming through the nets or getting tangled? So these are things that, you know, so even when we see it, there's so many questions of like, what's the source, what's the pathway, so that we can actually try to change. You can see here, so this was what they call a bomb. So in the middle of this was a rock, right? So the fishermen tell us, you know, that this was material that maybe another boat came upon. They put in their own rubbish and then they threw it aside. They threw it ashore. Again, going through the rubbish, you can see that some of the material would not have been purchased in Ireland. So again, it's giving us another indication of, well, you know, this international source of marine litter. You can see as well. So this is some of the long line. Like again, it's nylon, it can be recycled, but it has been just spooled up and dumped, you know, but brought ashore by the fleet. Stowing it is difficult. So, you know, like here we have some gillnet and longline again. So they're just tying it on like up on the foredeck to keep it safe as best they can and away from their own their own fish, and trying to stow it safely while they're at sea. We also profiled their own waste. So like in their own galley waste, which was what we call our kind of kitchen waste, they had up to 35% organic, up to over 15% hard plastic that can be recyclable. So again, we're saying, well, are these opportunities to improve? So the plastics and the cardboard and the paper, they could act, and the glass and metal, the tins of soup and tins of beans, they can actually be recycled, but at the moment they're not. So we're saying, well, there is opportunity that we can actually, I suppose, create opportunities for the circular economy for some of this material that should be reused or recycled. But again, it's putting the procedures in place and the facilities in place to improve that. And one of those is this new directive called the Port Reception Facilities Directive that was published in about 2019. And so there's a high there, you know, so this directive, the spirit of it is to improve these port reception facilities, to look for improved waste handling and waste management and handling plans to support end-of-life gear, improved waste management, like our recoverables, like the plastics and the tins and the cardboard and things like that. And as prep for it, we asked, we have 12, as I was saying, we've got our 12 fishing fluid reports. So we did a questionnaire. Do you have a waste management plan in place as we speak? Some of them, majority of yes, some of them no. So again, you know, you can see where the challenge are of, well, where the baseline to start, you know what I mean? Do you keep a record? So there's another directive, the Single-Use Plastics Directive. It's shorthand called the Single-Use Plastics Directive, but the real title, the full title is Managing the Impact of Plastics in the Marine Environment. And you know, they are looking for records and monitoring of waste, you know, from vessels on key areas. So again, these two directives will be looking for information and looking for engagement. So we're trying to help kind of understand what the industry can and can't do, and what BIM's role is to help that. As you know, we don't own the boats, we're not responsible for the directives, but it's like, as a development agency, how can we objectively support them to achieve these kind of goals and outcomes. So again, where do they send their records? So at the moment, there will be, the member states will be required to monitor, to report and monitor putting fishing gear on the market, putting fishing gear off the market, And at the moment, there's a number of places where the records are stored. Again, the waste contracts we found was quite an interesting, have you got one contractor for all waste, or is there different providers? And again, in some ports, it needs work to kind of improve, because that would be, I suppose, a driver to improve the service, from their contractors. And some of them have what we call zero waste. That would be the metals in particular, and wood and things like that, that they would either be taken away for free, or that there would be a slight recoverable cost at the moment. And then we asked them, well, what system do you currently have? And again, and because we're in 12 ports, this is kind of important that, there's a different procedure for returning either your own galley waste or your waste, or this marine litter, depending on the port. And if it's confusing, fishermen just go, I can't remember, or, it might be 3 o'clock in the morning when they're landing. And, so one of the things that we're trying to do is to improve the communication that between, or how to help the communication between the ports and the fishermen, so that this level of compliance is improved and reducing kind of friction points. We asked them about, so these are kind of interviews with the harbour masters, in terms of the upcoming legislation, and they would like kind of improved signage in the waste areas to say, well, you put your batteries here, and like when you go into one of those kind of municipal sites, everything's very clear, of what you put where. And they're saying that would be helpful to determine what they should put, and to put it there, and also support to redevelop those sites, to ensure to make them not compliant, but to support the outcomes of those directives. Yeah, and again, mixed. They say yes. There should be training with the crews. Some of them in the 54%, and then the extra 9% port and vessels, and less so in the port, because the harbour master saying, well, look, these are my staff. I can directly, inform my staff, but the vessels, they don't, like, the vessels are just users, so it's a different relationship that they'd have. So ideally, is to have this kind of consistent waste management system for all ports, and that would support the reporting as well and demonstrate what the vessels are doing. Because the way it is that if you come into a port, you must you are paid, you pay harbour dues for services. So basically, there's no incentive not to bring in your waste, because you're paid anyway, or you pay your fee. So it's like it's trying to have but in the ports, is there a way of maybe introducing some consistent areas that would be supportive for the fleet and the harbours? um, and as we're saying, maximize this availability of this wood and metal locally. It's not maximized in every port. Certain ports have a better relationship with the waste, with a metal kind of contractor than others, things like that. And there would be metal in the industry. They have kind of metal doors, what they call kind of doors at the sides to keep the net open, like a kite, when you're kind of, you need to keep the net, mouth of the net open. There's metal in that, and there's various, and there's wires that are needed for the strength of the net. So there is kind of material there, and to facilitate and reward those bringing in this, because a lot of this material is historic. You saw the growth in some of those photos, so it's not, some of this is out there, and then either bad weather would shift it up as well. So there's a historical issue there of material to be brought ashore. And, I suppose the big thing is to help reduce the costs for both the ports and vessels alike. So how to do that, and that goes back to having, I suppose, good systems. Um, so, the action plan for 2020 going into 21, we're going to continue with the surveys, and working with these harbour masters all the time is very important. And then, we were looking to investigate geolocation. Now, Clean Atlantic, the project that's based in Galway, is doing that. So we're saying, well, what are the learnings out of that we could actually bring back into the fleet? So, there's a lot of EU projects that we want to, I suppose, learn from, to have our plans, and to determine what is best that we could actually kind of fly with. Coming back to this so-called single-use plastics directive, a lot of it will be talk about putting material on and off the market in terms of fishing gear. And one of the things is like what's really important is to recognize the skills and knowledge in the sector of how this can be achieved. So we've had study days in net manufacturers and with harbour masters, fishermen, academia, EU projects to go, well, this is what we know. And, does that improve your knowledge? Does that kind of give you questions that you'd like to ask us? So again, this kind of communication between academic, science, industry, practitioners, of trying to kind of work all this out because it is a big, big elephant to bite. This one of our net makers, and he was showing us, well, kind of, I suppose, what we see in the litter, and he's saying, well, this is what he would do, and it was just really, it was a great, workshop, and we've created partnerships and synergies that we mightn't have had traditionally, even when I started in BIM 20 years ago. So now we're sitting down talking directly with a harbour master and a net maker, whereas we never, previously it would have been with just fishermen or and not necessarily these kind of new partnerships around, I suppose, ocean health and ocean wealth. And again, as I was saying earlier on, Martin Luther King, he said, I have a dream, not necessarily a plan. And I think that's really important when you approach industry, so that we kind of go, what are their insights? What's their information? And one of the things is identifying the leadership that they can bring to something, because a lot of this is change in behavior, change in mindset. And fishermen, they have to make decisions every day to make sure that they're out there fishing. They have to keep the boat safe, their crew safe, and they want to return. And they display like certain leadership every single day, and it's tapping into some of that decisive leadership that they need to be a successful fisherman, and asking them for help and asking them to volunteer. There's studies in volunteerism, and the biggest thing that people say, well, why, what's stopping you? I've never been asked. And that was a key thing in this fishing for litter, is like, it was like, here's a bag, will you take it to sea? Of course I will. And it was very good. We explored the topic, kind of, with objective tools like journey mapping and stakeholder engagement, so we can try to objectively collect information and generate information, or not only the knows and the don't knows, what we know we don't know, or what we didn't know and all those permutations. And that was the group that actually came, and they all said, like, we need to know more about how nets enter the professional network and how they come out, and gathering that together as an organization, as a community nearly, or as an ecosystem. It's not, this is just, we did a stakeholder mapping of all that we see who are involved in putting nets on and off the market. So it's quite extensive. Then in terms of, well, what is overlapping with fishing gear itself in terms of studies, legislation, waste, current reporting. So again, this is helping the industry prepare for these new directives coming forward. And with the single-use plastics, a lot of it is like, at the moment, there's a little agreement on what is the scale of the problem, because we go down to ports and we can see the historical problem, but what is the volume on and off? And that's one of the things that we're, I suppose, the directive is looking to do, is to try to encourage member states to get a handle on this. It's different material. We've everything from nylon, polyethylene, steel, polystyrene, polypropylene, and the segregating of these and preparing is a job in itself and an industry in itself, and that needs to be supported to facilitate that. There, under the single-use plastics, there will be an extended producer responsibility scheme, like you have for tires and washing up and wash machines and things like that. Except, I suppose, we're all different, but what we would say is like, well, if my washing machine broke in the morning, I'd get one and it would exactly fit into the right square in my kitchen. Whereas with a net, it's different, because fishermen would reuse parts of it, they'd keep it, they'd recondition it. So, I would never do that with a washing machine myself, and I'm sure there's very few who would. So it's like, well, how do we design an extended producer responsibility scheme that brings in some of the nuances that that need to be supported? So we've looked to examples like the farm plastics, and and their membership and how they manage their extended producer responsibility scheme. So this is nearly a far cry from fishing for litter, but again, it just shows the tentacles and the areas that need to be explored to give full support so that it's not seen as just a retrieval program, because we want, you know, and the industry want as well to do things differently, but to do it, I suppose, and our role as BIM is looking to see where we can help them as best we can from just a development point of view, because we're not the competent authority or enforcement. So engaging industry, you know, so we've done some merchant, and again, they don't charge, or we don't pay them to participate in fishing for litter. But one of the things we learned from some of our colleagues in the continent, so there's about 11 countries that have a type of program in one shape or form around fishing for litter. We're one of the few that actually has it as a national program, because of the size of our fleet, I suppose, and the size of the country. Others do it kind of regionally, or, you know, but we've kind of generated some merchandising to give to the fishermen and the crew as thank yous, and, you know, just as small tokens to do that. We try to create opportunities for them to share their expertise and their passion about the marine environment. So we've done school tours down to Kilmore Quay, and, you know, and it was like, you know, we were down at the Harbour Master, up in the community centre, in the RNLI, in the Coast Guard, and all of these people, and the core message was in around tides, you know, and the impact of tides on fishing, on litter, on navigation, on safety. So we did that with the RNLI, and it was just wonderful that they're part of a wider, you know, kind of interest, and the kids were, you know, they took the fishermen as quickly as the RNLI, you know, and you're kind of going, you know, it's creating that opportunity that these are professional people working so locally among them. And we took them to even up to the Chandlerleys, you know, so the kids were trying on the boots and the coats and the whole lot, and, you know, it sounded very Irish nearly, but they loved it. You know, it was just, they'd never kind of seen what they'd have to wear at going to sea, or try it on, and the big hoods and things like that. So it's just a bit of fun as well. And we go to things like blessing the boats. So, you know, and so that this is in Clarehead, and, you know, we've had examples. And so this man here, you know, he is hugely active in the RNLI. They got a new boat there last year, and he actually brought it from, you know, it was commissioned in Poole in the UK, and he brought it to, you know, part of the crew that brought it to Ireland, and visited various ports with other RNLI stations along the East Coast. And just a lot, like, and this is kind of like voluntary. That lady there, so, you know, she would work in like under her kind of tenure. Her Tidy Towns group won Pride of Place nationally, you know, for Clarehead, and the work that they were doing on their Tidy Towns. And it was just a natural extension for them to include the boats to bring in to fishing for litter, you know, because they already have Pride of Place, you know, and hugely so. And then we join them, and, you know, we do small activities like, you know, even jam jar painting. We're kind of upcycling and getting kids to talk about marine litter, see it, and also an opportunity to talk to the folks, in particular, maybe the husbands of the fishermen, who would be bringing their kids. And that, again, that extension of their pride, saying, here we are, BIM with their big gazebo, and coming down to communicate kind of officially to the local community what the work the industry are doing. So we partnered with Clean Coast, and we did a category for Fishing Community of the Year. And, you know, so there was three shortlisted, and Kilmore Quay won it. And they were delighted because they, you know, again, it's a recognition of not just them fishing for litter, but actually of the value that they kind of contribute to their local community. We work closely with fishermen. They're very active in social media. You know, they take photos every day, they post videos every day. Some of them have like a lot of followers, and you know, the opportunity that they can actually kind of be ambassadors to each other. So you can see there, like this fisherman, he found a wash machine, so he tied it onto the rails and brought it ashore. So, you know, and here I so this is me at home in Roach's Point, and I went, oh, the lads are going out. So here are 2 boats that are on my fishing for litter scheme. So I took the photo and I text them going, best of luck, you know, kind of, with your fishing. And it's just that kind of touch of keeping in contact, that it's not just, for me, it's not just a job, if you know what I mean. I really feel quite passionate about the life that they have, how hard they have to work, And I suppose as a public servant in a development agency, it's like I take that role very seriously of how I can support them to do better and to be better. Because they're ambassadors themselves. They set up their own Facebook page for Fishing for Litter, and so they post themselves as well to each other. And so again, it creates this kind of a bit of networking between them. We Seafest in Cork, not in 2019. We launched a campaign called Love Our Ocean, and we kind of the focus of it was crews around the country and their role, and they were like, yeah, absolutely. So they would they took kind of part in professional photography, and they were like, it was kind of a bit new for them, to kind of get professional photography done, but they were delighted. And this man travelled all the way from the Aran Islands down to Cork with his wife and 2 children, to see it in action. So again, there's pride of place, and then, in terms of, this is where we are. So this is one of our POs, the PUSE organization, and it's working with them, and some of it is really difficult, in terms of, it's challenging, but it's, for me, it's rewarding, and it's a way of connecting with the industry in another way, as well as other programs that I have running with them. So for me, it's been this catalyst of a wider engagement, of wider thinking, and tapping into more than just fish, if you know what I mean. So that's my presentation, Sheena.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Catherine. Absolutely brilliant. It's just so lovely to see. It really feels like very much a team and a team effort right across the board, from children all the way up. And it's just so lovely to see. We already have a couple of questions in, Catherine, for you. So Fiona asked, you mentioned that all fishing boats must pay a harbour fee, whether they do or do not bring waste in, and thus there is no incentive to do so. In a region of Spain I have visited, everyone must pay a fee for waste disposal, albeit on land. But if you then go to extra effort to return recyclable materials to a municipal site, i.e. items that do not go into their green bins, paint, wood, metal, etc., you get money back. In other words, there's an incentive as you get money back for taking positive action. This sort of idea could apply to boats bringing waste ashore in relation to money back from the harbour fee they've paid.
And that's a great point. And actually, in the Port Reception Facilities Directive, there is opportunity where the Commission, as a Commission document, are looking to say, be creative, create incentives, of trying to, what they kind of split it into direct fees and indirect fees. And if there's a way of, so like bringing something back could kind of reduce that indirect fee, because you're able to kind of maybe, as you say, reduce down against that direct fee. And that is within the scope of the Port Reception Facilities Directive. And the challenge is that we'll say that our harbour dues are done by individual county councils. So individual county councils would have to do this. And that's part of, I suppose, we're looking to go, well, where could you do that? And some of that will depend on the facilities that they have. And then we have we have 6 what we call fishery harbour centres. So absolutely, the opportunity is there, but it's trying to do it in a way that would actually work, and I suppose I really, really hope that like initiatives like this can be really, really grasped to achieve and to kind of participate more in that circular economy of our plastics and of our cardboard and tins, which should be, like in that circular economy. So absolutely, I really hope that Port Reception Facilities Directive will really take the initiative and the creativity that's there.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. At least if it's in the plan, it's a starting point, isn't it? It's probably just getting all that background, I suppose,
yeah,
in just getting it developed, and once it's developed, but that
and the
probably
thought
takes
process, when you see something red, when you're reading something in black and white, and you kind of go, how do you bring that to life? And that's where working with the sector, what would they do? So I'm, we might have great ideas of how you could maybe incentivize returning ABC, but actually it's bringing that in with the vessels as well to go, would you do that? Can you do that?
Yeah, yeah.
But
And how can you do it?
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Eugene asked, and you kind of touched on it, but that you do coordinate with Untashka Clean Coast, but what he was asking was, are there hotspots on the coast of marine litter linked to fishing areas? So at the moment, do you see hotspots?
Yeah, so what we have as well, so I kind of spoke specifically around the fishing filleter, which is the catching sector, but we also do a program of what we call shore cleans with the aquaculture sector. And, and it's again, weather has an impact on some of this. So we do actually, so in Clean Coast, in around those kind of what we call our commercial bays, if there's kind of commercial activity, we would work closely and respond very quickly with Clean Coast, and also with our own officers who would go, oh, there's an easterly, there's a westerly, and they would go and kind of coordinate the aquaculture workers and companies in this place. We also find that you will have some hotspots close to ports, so we find that it's either, for whatever reason, whether it's kind of being, indirectly going back into the marine environment, or there's activity. So, yeah, and that's why working with the harbour masters and having that high level of bring it in, bring it ashore, absolutely, we'll take everything, that will help reduce these hotspots.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure who this from. I think it's from Fiona. Clean Coast. Is there a version for freshwater bodies living beside Blessington Lakes? Yeah.
To be honest, and again, I'm not going to speak for Clean Coast, but they have about at least 350, maybe up to 400 groups, and some of them are, they're connected to water bodies. So I don't think Clean Coast say, oh, we do nothing but the coast. They do, because I suppose the litter is sourced so far up. If you look at, so
Yeah.
where does it come from? It will come in from inshore. We will have, 80% of the marine litter comes from the urban source. So, Clean Coast, they have, and I know coming up for April, they'll be looking for new groups to register or to reinvigorate. And, they very rarely send, because Antarctica also do the kind of the spring clean, which is inland. So there's no reason why, whether you're a Clean Coast group or a Tidy Towns group,
Yeah.
it's, they're a very broad church for any voluntary grouping.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, maybe that might be a new one to start around Blessington Lakes.
Yeah.
Eugene, what are the enablers and barriers to mobilise a fishing community to get to basically get mobilised and make change? So I suppose, what are those barriers and what are those nuggets, I suppose, that have made them get involved?
I think, we do, you kind of say, well, as a persona, as a group, what are their motivations, and for this we found that, because we took advice from this organization called Chemo in Scotland, and saying, well, would you have advice? And they're saying, every time a vessel comes on board or a port comes on board, you should nearly celebrate every single one, because that is, you're highlighting, good practice, um, and it's not that they want to be held up in lights, but it's about normalizing this behavior and socializing it for us all. What's challenging is, it's so even though, like, I've got some fishermen and they connect to me on Instagram and some on Twitter and Facebook, it's still very hard to access the crews, because I don't have a hotline, and, so we're building a CRM system, kind of like a relationship database internally for the emails and numbers. But it's really, it's very hard to get everybody connected, and that's a challenge, because there'll be still vessels around the country, and they've never heard of fishing filleter. They just, if they're not on the right social media, or they're not getting the right
Yeah.
tweet or the right this. So even, like, knowing who we're accessing or reaching is a challenge. And there's, it's other barriers, and you know other things then, like, if because we're a state agency, so if there's other bad press, if you know what I mean, or if there's a challenge in the sector, the kickback is like, well, oh, that's BIM, or oh, and there might be a negativity. So, so even though it's got nothing to do with fishing for litter, but it's seen as like, oh, that's a state organization after doing something that they don't like or they don't approve, or that, and so at the moment with COVID and Brexit, there's a huge stressed industry. And me personally, I have to keep that in mind, saying, like, their business is important, their family is important, and putting that in perspective all the time. And like, when we see, from sustainability leadership, if you just talk about the environment, but it's actually about enabling the people to support the environment. And I think that is hugely relevant to working with the catching sector, because after being out there personally, you really have to go. You have to let them do what they can do on their terms, rather, because like I've been out in a gale force 10, and I'm telling you, you're pinned to the bed and hoping that everything, and it's, so
Yeah,
I always remember that, going, well, like if I was out in the wind, or you look out in the weather, the last couple of days, it's so hard, and you have to bring that with you, that they can't do the right thing all the time, so other times I have to be very careful. They're kind of going, later, I lost a net, or I'm after, or
yeah,
there was a day, we nearly collide, so there's
yeah,
other risks, and you have to keep those risks in perspective, rather than, oh, but I just need you to do my job of fishing for litter, so it's a huge relationship thing of understanding those risks that they have to do every day to their business, to themselves, and keeping that in perspective.
yeah. And I suppose it's a real kind of a long term, they will be able to do it when they can, like as you
Yeah,
say, because it's not, it's so difficult going and
it's so
working at
difficult.
sea,
Yeah,
like it's so difficult, and they might be able to help one trip and then they can't the other, or financially they're struggling for one
yeah, or if
trip
they're
and they
tied
just
up,
couldn't make it.
and
Yeah,
yeah, and God forbid, if a boat is lost or life is
yeah,
lost,
yeah,
that's a really,
absolutely.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
absolutely so tragic, and so, like,
so
like,
difficult. Yeah,
yeah, it's nearly unspeakable,
yeah, yeah,
and one of the things that we say internally, among our, is that, like, a fisherman isn't just for Christmas. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? So as you say, there's a long haul there, and at this
yeah,
stage, after 20 years, I'm now on nearly like a third generation. So I might have worked with grandparents, fathers, and now those children. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? So they're not just for Christmas, and it's kind of
yeah,
keeping that in perspective, that this is a long-term relationship, to work
yeah.
with the fleet.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, from Liam, he said, "Great to see you, Catherine." Liam Morrison.
Hi,
Um,
Liam.
yeah, nice presentation. Really enjoyed it. Some great memories from your days at NUIG and Mary O'Connell too. I suppose I just had one question to ask you with regards to when that say ghost nets come in, and you can see how they're all tangled at the moment, like, and you did mention it in one of your slides, how difficult and how much cost is associated with trying to sort that. Who at the moment sorts it, or is it a case that you kind of have to look at, in for a better word, a ball of fishing gear and saying it's actually not, we can't afford to sort that? What's that kind of way up in terms of plans?
Yeah, so like anything that comes up as like in a net like that, like, and it's marine litter, it's really hard to segregate and to separate it out, because it's contaminated and it's knotted up, and you'd need bolt cutters, you'd need like
Yeah,
this, and protective equipment to cut through it. So that material really, like all of the material is disposed of responsibly with kind
yeah,
of licensed contractors, and really we leave it up to them to go, well,
yeah,
if you can, if you think there's something that you can be salvaged out of this, but if you think there isn't, so we leave it to the professional waste contractors for the marine litter part.
yeah,
But it's looking for these interventions of how to maybe encourage the end of life material, so it doesn't get into that
into
state,
that state.
and
Yeah,
that's the challenge. But
yeah,
even that, so we've had some activity in that area, but it's really hard, because you need people and companies and industry who's saying, yeah, I think there's a value, there's a like a commercial proposition here, And so then it comes back to that wider state piece of, well, how do we support early intervention of change to create something do you need to put on the stabilizers for the wheels to kind of, and until these directives maybe kick in a bit harder, and the whole Green Deal growth mindset, it starts, that we think about it every single minute of like that, in the same way that like smoking, oh my God, every resource should have a circular, not necessarily a closed loop, an open loop, but we're kind of going, these are resources on these kind of planetary boundaries that we should be maximizing. But and that takes a village, and that takes a village for us all, to get to that point.
But I suppose the community and the fishing community are strong, so which is always good. There's a strong community there, like in the.
And it's also not to overburden them, so like, we try to keep and kind of coming back to maybe like a community-based social marketing approach. What's the ask? Is it a simple ask? Can they do it? Or is it intangible and we're kind of going, oh, save the planet, and they're going, because you need to be, you need to give me a little bit more than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair enough. MacDara as well. Do you have any foreign vessels that land into Irish ports involved in the BIM fishing for litter?
So I'm not in contact with any of the boats, but I know in one of the ports, there would be some of the of international vessels would land material, and because again they Ireland is nearly maybe their home port really. So even though it's a foreign registered vessel, so the harbour master would at the moment, we don't have the resources to translate into different languages at the moment. But that would be at really the discretion of the harbour master, in terms, because that vessel is using facilities. So the harbour master can say, look, bring in marine litter, or bring in this and bring in that. So we do that. It would be done at that level as opposed to through our kind of national scheme.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, Catherine, I think that's all the questions. If anyone else has a question, please jump in. I'll just check YouTube. No questions there. Thank you so much for coming today. As you can tell, there's many people that are very interested in with all the questions, and I suppose we all wish you the very best for continued success of the program. It's absolutely brilliant, and thanks for coming and giving us your time, and also thanks to all the people who have joined us both here on Zoom and also on YouTube as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much for your time and the interest, because we go about this work and it's we don't really expect interest, if you know what I mean. We kind of just get on with it, and the vessels get on with it. So thank you very much for letting us talk about it.
Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, thanks everyone, and we'll end the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.